All right, matchmakers, you know how I am. I love me some habits. And when I can find someone who can talk about habits, you bet your sweet bottom, they are going to be on the show. Today, I'm so happy to have Alessia Citro on the show. She has also just written a book about habits. So you know how I feel about good books. Subtle plug, it's really good. She's here to talk about habits, and she talks about habits for like regular people. And you know me, I am not about the complicated. I am all about how do we keep this stuff so simple. And she is here. How do you bridge that gap between what you want and actually getting it, right? And how many of us have been like plugging along and we're just like, is life ever going to throw us a bone? Well, have a listen today and we'll find out how life is going to throw us a bone and how you are in charge of life throwing you a bone. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Kim. I loved that intro.
Yeah, one of the things that resonated with why I wanted to have a show is that simple, right? It's like life is so complicated, and then us ladies have find a way to add 500 layers on top of it to make it even more complicated.
Isn't that the truth? Why do we do that?
I don't know. I don't know. And then we get so sick of ourselves, yet we find another way to like complicate it again.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I feel like the nuance and the layers are a superpower and the Achilles heel, as most superpowers are.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Because we try to get out of our own way, but then we're like, we have to have a plan to get out of our own way. But that requires a spreadsheet and then a book and then a this and then a that. And then next thing you know, 4 years have gone by.
100%. Yep. Relate to all of that.
Yeah. So as I was, going through your profile, and you started in high tech. And I think, back when you started, that was like, oh my God, I have
Oh, yeah.
arrived.
I thought I like full transparency. I thought I was the shit. I'm like,
Oh yeah.
oh, like I work at Google. I'm so cool. I'm at the pinnacle of my career. And
Right.
then the universe was like, ha ha, watch what's going to happen.
Yeah. You're like, do you want a plot twist? I got you, girl.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. Big plot twist.
so was it during that kind of like go, 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 Google life, go, 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 high tech life that you discovered habits, or were habits always kind of out there somewhere, but it was kind of like the habits that showed you this life wasn't for you?
That's a great question. Honestly, I was so in my masculine doing
Mm,
hustle
mm,
energy when I was
mm.
working in tech. At no fault of the company I loved working for the most, which was Salesforce. It's just kind of that environment, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're in sales, which I was. So honestly, back then, my only habits were pounding the phone
Yep.
and making deals happen.
Yep.
Anything regarding my health, my self-care, my soul care, that took a back seat because my entire identity was tied to how good am I at my job and how much money am I making?
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. And I have a high tech background too. And that was literally me. Like my life was like hustle. If I sat at my desk and you told me that you were going to buy $200,000 if I got on a plane today to have lunch with you, I'll see you in a few hours. Like I
Yep.
would figure out a
Regardless
way.
of what's happening in your life, right?
Right. I would figure out a
Yeah.
way to get on a plane to Dallas. Like figure it out.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I totally feel that. And, hindsight being 2020, you're like, you would get the paycheck and you'd be like, "Pff, look at this. I'm
Oh, yeah.
rewarded. That's why I do what I do." And, you're getting all the accolades at work, yet, I'm coming home and like eating ramen and like exercise. What the hell's that?
You know what is so crazy? Okay, so like your phone will show you pictures from like however many years ago to the day. One came up just last week of me 8 years ago while I was at Salesforce, and things got a lot worse when I left Salesforce and went to Google, by the way. I looked at this picture and I was like, I am aging in reverse. Like, who is that girl? She looks
Yes.
so haggard, so tired, so sad. There's no joy in her eyes. And I'm not saying
Right.
that people who work in tech all are like dead in their eyes and like have no, but I had no balance. And that was a me
No.
problem.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the balance, because it's like you're getting rewarded for all the crazy ass stuff that you're doing, and there's no, like, no one's gonna be like, hey girl, you went for a walk today. Way to go. Like no one's going to say that to you.
No.
Where if you like close the deal, it's like, hey girl, way to go. Here's some more money. Here's a higher quota. So now I have to work even more to, get more accolades.
Exactly. Yeah. Ring the gong, make a big deal out of it, top the leaderboard,
Right.
refresh the dash. You're number one in the region, the nation. It's like dopamine hits for stuff that doesn't actually really matter. So now
Right.
I'm like, how can I leverage that competitive nature and like loving to be feeling good, getting the dopamine rush, but with things that actually matter, like my health, my family, the mission I have in the world. And I have to say, I have a lot more peace and a lot more joy since making that switch, but it didn't come easy. So we
No,
can
and
chat
it
about
doesn't.
that.
It doesn't. It like, and that's the one thing I want, those of you guys who are listening. I know that you think that like one day you're gonna wake up and there's gonna be this like lightning bolt, or there's gonna be some type of like, epiphany, some type of elf driving by. I don't know. It's not
I'm
how it
here for
happens.
that.
Me too. I mean, I want people to ring my doorbell. Like that's what I want. And that's not how it happens.
Yeah.
It's like you just get to that point that one day you're just so sick of your own shit that you're like, there has to be a better way.
I literally write that in my book because it's so funny. Anyone who comes to me and works with me as a coaching client, they all say some variation of that. I am sick of my own bullshit and I'm ready to make a change.
Yeah. And you never know what that day is, right? You just all of a sudden it's just like one day you're just like, not anymore.
Yeah.
Like no more.
And it usually is going to take something really awful and really shitty to get to that point.
Yeah, for sure. And so what was your kind of like, here you are, you're doing all the things and you're successful. And what was your one day that you're just like, yeah, today's the day.
Okay, there's like a couple pieces to this, but I would say I did have an epiphany light bulb lightning strike moment. And it came because I was tasked with writing and delivering the eulogy for my grandparents' joint memorial service. And they were beloved to me and
Mm.
such objectively amazing humans. Together, they lived about 197 years of combined life.
Oh wow.
So, to do their lives justice made me do a lot of introspection. And
Mm.
when I wrote that, I was like, oh, I would not like what was said in my eulogy if people were being really honest and my funeral was
Right.
today.
Right.
So, I got to change things.
Mm.
So, backing up a little bit. So, my role at Google started March 2nd of 2020. So you can do the math on what happened a week later, right?
Wow.
And if it
Wow.
hadn't been for my daughter, oh man, I'd probably still be there. But I had a 15-month-year-old, or at the time, she was 15 months, and her daycare shut down. And my
Yeah.
husband's got a really demanding job. And I talked to my boss, who I knew he'd recruited me from Salesforce. And I was like, hey, dude, I'm working like 3 hours a day while she's napping. Like, I'm falling behind. I need help. And he's like, oh, no, no, I'm not worried about you. Like, it's all good in the hood, whatever. Okay, fast forward to December, someone who has their entire self-worth and identity tied up in how good they are at their job, and things ain't going too hot by December, as you can
Right.
imagine, right? School's still shut down, all of that stuff, and that identity got stripped from me.
Mm.
And then my grandfather died, that same month, and it was just like deep depression, and clawing my way out of it for, 6 months and just stumbling and making lots of stupid mistakes as an entrepreneur when I finally figured out I needed to leave this job. And anyway, so it's been a lot of trial and error and trial by fire, quite frankly, and I wouldn't trade any of it.
Yeah.
But, it was very unexpected how all this came about, and I kept coming back to the common denominator. Your life is not where you want it to be because you will not be devoted enough and dedicated enough to do the minutia, the things you deem so insignificant they don't matter. That is what is keeping you from having the life you want. Focus on the little things and who you're being while you're doing them, and the rest is going to sort itself out. And that's where habits
Yes.
came in.
Yeah. It's so funny that you said that, I say it all the time. It's the little things. Like, most of my audience come to me for health and fitness. And many people want to lose the 30 pounds or 40 pounds, and they want these huge things to do. This like climb Everest. And I was like, but Everest starts with maybe buying the right shoes.
Yes.
And it's like,
Yes.
go out and find the right shoes for Everest. find the best sleeping bag because you'll be out there a long time. But it's like they
Yeah.
want these like big things to do versus that one little small thing that if I do that over and over again, it's going to lead me to where I want to go.
Mic drop. Yes. And it's always the things that seem so insignificant that actually make the biggest difference.
Mm,
Those are also the things that we tend to ditch first because we get
yes.
complacent and we underestimate how important they are.
Because they're boring, right? Like
They're boring. Yeah.
if I told you every single day, have a gallon of water and 20 grams of protein, and you're like, okay, yeah, what else? What else? And I'm like, do those two things for 6 months and call me back.
Mhm.
And they would be like, she doesn't know anything, right? And it's like, but you didn't do it for 6 months, did you?
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
was too easy.
Okay, yes. I'm so glad you said this. Our culture is obsessed with go big or go home, all or
Mm-hmm.
nothing. And also, for a number of reasons, we seem to be obsessed with struggling and hard work, especially if you are listening and you're from the Midwest. How much does the hard work thing come into play? I'm originally from Iowa, right? So I get this. And what if it got to be easy? What if it didn't have to be a struggle?
Mm. It's funny that you say, what if it had to be easy? Like when I was in the thick of my, like, I must hustle, like every day must be action packed to really make me feel accomplished.
Yeah.
The very first coach I hired, she said to me, she's like, Kim, she goes, what if today was easy? And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, don't woo woo me this. Like, I have no idea what that means. And she said, what if today you just did three things and you took the rest of the day off? What would that be? Like, what would you do with yourself? And that literally was just like the most foreign concept to me,
Yeah.
to let it be easy.
And I feel like too with like the hard work and the struggle, there's this undertone of like you need to be suffering. Well,
Yes.
the way that you create lasting change is by hacking into the reward center of your brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do that by feeling good,
Yes.
not by feeling bad.
Right.
So then we can unwind that and talk about how do you create habits that feel good? How do you celebrate? How do you make them stick? But I think first it's getting the conscious awareness that things don't have to be unpleasant for them to count, to move the
Yes.
needle. You get to enjoy your life. It doesn't have to suck for it to like, what are you trying to prove?
Right.
Right? Like at the end of your life, are people going to be like, oh, well, at least she worked really hard? Like, no, I don't want to be known for hustling. I want to be known for like having a really full, rich life in every sense of the word.
Yeah, I had to write down what you wrote because what you just said because it's just that was those two things were like gold. Like,
Oh,
why do
thank
things
you.
have to be unpleasant? Why do things have to be unpleasant to count? Right? I mean, if
Mhm.
I think about, I'm a personal trainer as well, and if I every time a client leaves, I'm like, oh, how was the workout? Like, oh, horrible, it sucked, but it was good. See you next week. Versus like it's now they're starting to hear the vocabulary, but now it's like, ah, that's just exactly what I needed, right? Like it's now
Mhm.
more about what I needed versus I didn't push me hard enough. So it wasn't an okay workout.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
then the second thing was like, you talk about eulogy. Like, do I want to be known as like, oh, Kim was awesome. She was a great hustler. Like, is that what I want people to say
Nope.
about me?
No, you want them to say something around having had an impact and making them feel great, right? And you don't
Right.
have to work yourself to the bone and have no life to make that happen.
Yeah. No, those are two like that is just if you stop listening right now, take that away from you. Like that was absolutely like that was just two amazing like takeaways in like 10 minutes. Um, but as you kind of, here you are, you're at your grandparents' eulogy, you're like, is this my life? Right? That's your is this my life moment.
Yeah.
Now, as you kind of reflect on that, was that kind of like, my habits taught me to get up, make 500 phone calls to, hit whatever quota or goal or whatever it was that you were assigned for that month. And you're like, is this how I want to lead my life?
Yeah, that was a resounding no. So I'm like, okay, what are the things that actually really matter to me? Like, if I were to, God forbid, die tomorrow, like, what would I do today? How would I spend my time? It would not be pounding the phone. It would not be creating content for Instagram. It would not, none of that. The
Mm,
things that matter to me are my husband and my daughter. That's it. I mean, and the rest of my family, but like, that's where my priorities are.
right,
So how can I be the type of wife and mother and human being for everyone I encounter that creates a positive ripple in the world? And then reverse engineer that. What do I have to do to be that person? Well, I know, and I talk about this in the book, it's a hierarchy of needs, right? Maslow's hierarchy.
right,
I know that if I have not eaten, if I am dehydrated, if I am low on sleep, I'm not pleasant to be around.
right.
So I got to shore up those basic things,
Mm,
right? For a lot of people, I'm not one of these people that has to work out for their mental health. It definitely helps, but it's not a make or break for me. But I definitely feel better when I do. If you're one of those people where you are like not a nice person, if you haven't worked out, you need to make daily movement a priority, not for aesthetics
right,
or you being the type of person you want to be. And then layering it on from there. What are other things that make me not who I want to be? Insecurity around finances in my business. Okay, so what can I do to make that better? How can
right.
I make that more stable? And then you go up the hierarchy. I'll just quickly summarize it really quick in case you've never heard of Maslow's hierarchy. It's a pyramid, right? So the base of the pyramid are your physiological needs. I'm talking water, sleep, shelter, food, stuff like that. Next, safety, security, stability needs. After that is love and belonging and connection. The fourth layer is self esteem. And the final and fifth layer is self actualization. A lot of people who listen to shows like this and like my podcast, they love to just jump to self actualization. And you know what? If the bottom four layers of your pyramid have holes in them, you're going to be playing whack a mole. You got to
Yeah.
focus on the basics first.
Mm, yeah. And, and we alluded to before, it's that the base, what you just described, you're like, oh, if I don't get a good night's sleep, if I'm hungry, I'm not in a good mood. But it's like, oh, well, I got this meeting and then I got this, I got this, I get that. I'll eat later.
I do that a lot still, if I'm being really honest. I wrote a book on habits because I needed it, just so everyone's clear. I'm not a quote unquote disciplined person.
Yeah. But so many people will do that where now you probably kind of like, even though you find yourself still doing it, it's probably less than what you did in the past.
Huge improvement. Yep. Yep. And it's never going to be perfect. I think that's another thing that
Right.
derails people. They're like, oh, well, I had this cheat meal when I wasn't supposed to. So I guess I'll just stop trying to eat better.
Right.
I've actually done that before. Like 8 years ago, I did that back when I
It's
had my sad looking picture. So I get it. I'm not shaming you if you fall into this bucket.
No, so many people do that, and it's like, I was guilty of that as well, and, the one thing that someone said to me that I find myself saying whenever I kind of get into those, like, spin cycles, is that if I get a flat tire, would I go out and slash all the rest of my tires?
Oh my God. I love that. I'm going to use that, Kim. That's good.
And so, like, every time we all have those, like, woe is me days, and I'm like, "Okay, it's a flat tire, Kim." I'm like, "Am I gonna slash all the tires, or am I gonna call AAA and have them flip that tire for me?" Um, but as you were saying, you still, you're like, I still know that I skip meals, but it's like, it's different when and you find yourself and you pause, you're like, I'm doing it again. And then you go over here and you get a meal versus before old you would have been like, girl, we got calls to make. So shut down that hunger.
So true. Well, and here's the other thing I did too. I'm like, all right, I know that this is a pattern I have. I get really busy. I also have ADHD, so I think it's literally like forgetting to eat. Why? Why do we do this? So I'm like, okay, what could make it easier for me to eat something healthy when I really don't have the
Mm,
time and didn't plan and forgot? So my answer has been like find the best, most nutrient dense protein bars or quick and easy grab and go snacks that I can. And that has made a huge difference. Huge difference.
and I like what you just said, make it easy. Right. We talked
Yes.
about the struggle. So it's like, okay, I know I'm not going to, in my thick of the day, sit down and make this gourmet meal. It's not
Oh
going to
yeah, not
happen.
going to happen.
But I know that if I'm able to quickly go in a cupboard and grab something quick, or quickly go in the refrigerator, grab something quick, maybe it microwaves for 2 minutes, I know I'm more likely to do that. So it's like you've said, okay, if I am busy, this is what I'm going to do. So that's, you've already kind of had these like preemptive thoughts. So it's not in this,
Yeah.
in the moment, like, what do I do now? I need to eat something. And you're like scrambling.
Yes. And actually, making something easy is the cornerstone of creating habits. It
Yes.
takes so little friction for you to not do something. So if
Yeah.
you find yourself not doing something that you want to do, that you want to make a habit, ask yourself, and you'll never forget this, WTF, not the one you're thinking. WTF as in, where's the friction? What is making it hard to do? And again, it's gonna be shocking to you if you analyze it that way, how little it takes for you to not do something. Like, I give an example in the book about how I wouldn't foam roll even though, like, I would get pseudothoracic outlet syndrome, and, like, I'm a side sleeper, so, like, my hands would go numb
Yeah. Yeah.
depending
Yeah.
on what side I was sleep so, like, it was getting pretty serious, right? I wasn't just foam rolling for, like, shits and giggles. I would not do it if I didn't have a hair tie in the room where I foam roll, despite the fact that it would take me about 15 seconds to walk down the hall and grab one from the bathroom. I'm
Right.
talking that little friction to not
Hmm.
do something.
Yeah, and it's I like that, and James Clear talks about how we need to be able to like literally make these cues where he's like, when I didn't want to run, I put my shoes right by the door. So it was like I had to walk past those damn shoes and make a conscious decision to step over the shoes.
Yes, yes. And actually, so while we're on this topic too, there's 4 components of every single human behavior. I don't care what it is, they all have some amount of the 4. So you can remember it as ACTS,
Mm,
ACTS. So the A is ambition. You have a desire to do the behavior at some level, even if it's very low. I'll talk about that more in a minute too, if you want me to. The C is for capability. Can you do it or not? The T is for trigger, the prompt or the cue to do it. And then
yeah,
the S is for satisfaction. There has to be a reward. Sometimes the reward is not feeling pain, by the
right.
way. So you're going to have some level of these 4 in every behavior. I always tell my clients, focus on capability. If you can make
Yes.
something easier to do, you will probably do it, even if you're not that motivated. Likewise, trigger is super important. While you are waiting
Yes.
for the habit to become encoded, like the example you just gave, you are going to need a reminder in some way, whether that's a post it note, a reminder on your phone, an alarm going off, the shoes in the doorway, whatever it is to do the behavior, or you're going to forget till it's wired in.
Oh yeah, completely. And you know what? I love the I'm big on triggers because I like you mentioned ADHD. If I literally don't set alarms for my calls during the week, I'm screwed. I would be like, I feel like I had something to do today. Oh yeah, 3 hours ago.
I thought actually, that's so funny you said that earlier. I was like, oh my God, did I miss the interview? Because no reminder had gone off. Luckily, I didn't. But yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's a real thing. You got
it's
to
a
make
real
sure you're
thing.
getting reminded.
Right. So trigger, like I'm a big fan of triggers, and I always tell people like I have a yellow water bottle because I can't lose this. Like it stands out in my room. So it's like, oh, I see the yellow. I'm like, it forces me to drink more water. I can easily find it when I put it down in some random place in my house about 500 times a day.
And you've
Um,
made it easier to drink water because I just spied a straw in there.
yes.
That's a right?
And
Spe
I
Yeah.
gotta say, I thought the straw was bullshit. I really
No, the
did.
straw will make you drink so much more water. It's actually kinda stupid.
I really thought for a long time, I thought it was bullshit. I was like, I drink a lot of water anyway, but I literally felt like I drink more water with this damn straw. Um, and then, but you said something that I think I have been missing, the
Mm,
capability,
yep,
because it's really easy for me to say, I want to drink more water, right? It's really easy for me to say that. And then I get this, I put it places that I can see. So, okay, great. I have a trigger. But it's like, if I freaking hate water, no matter how colorful my water bottle is, no how many damn straws I put in it, I'm not going to drink the water.
yep. So how could you make it easier to do that? Where's the
Right.
friction? You don't like the taste, so how could you improve the taste, right?
Right. And so it's like I don't think most people like that capacity part took it to another level. And I was like, so, and then maybe it's like, maybe I just don't start with water. Like maybe it's something else I start with that I don't have to brainstorm so much about, like, okay, could I put lemon in it? Could I do this? And like, what if I just don't have the capacity at this moment to think to reduce the friction in water? And so it's like, be okay with that's not a place to start with me right now.
Yeah. And I always tell people tackle the habit. Well, a couple of things. Tackle habits that are low on that pyramid first. Because if you're not properly nourished, if you're dehydrated, if you're not sleeping enough, if you're in poor health, you got to deal with that stuff before you can deal with anything else.
Yeah.
Right. So tackle what is most interesting to you to tackle.
Yes.
That's a big one. The
Yes.
more I really don't like relying on the A of the behavior formula, the ambition, the
Yeah.
motivation, because it's so fair weather, right? Like
Mm,
it's why people join a gym January 1st and then they typically stop going 3 weeks later, right? Just
exactly.
as an example everyone knows and relates to. But at the same time, if you want to do something, that's probably the one to start with versus like,
Hi.
you're back.
What's funny, like you froze for a second, and then I'm like, okay, she's gonna come back, and then everything
Oh,
went
and
black.
you froze for me.
So weird.
Huh.
So
Okay.
weird.
Well, that's all right. We'll pick back up. What was the last thing you heard me say?
Hold on, I think my audio got all weird now too. Audio. All right. You were talking about ambition.
Oh, yep. Okay. Got it. So hopefully I'll make this as painless for you to edit as possible. Okay. I always tell people the habit to start with is the one that you want to start with. So when you look at the bottom of that hierarchy, what are the basic habits that need shoring up? What is the one you're most excited to start with? And that is the most accessible.
Yeah.
I don't want you relying on your desire to do something because motivation can be a super fair weather friend.
Oh
Like,
God, yeah.
like people like January 1, it's like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym. And then 3 weeks later, they don't. And now we have data from apps that proves that that's a pretty widespread fact. So ambition is helpful, but don't rely on it. And then how can you make it so micro? So if one of
Yes.
your habits is like, oh, I want to start walking every day to like move my body, your micro version of that habit is just to put your shoes on. And
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. Well, when I first started kind of really getting into habits, this woman, she was saying, she goes, when she first started coaching habits, she would teach people to floss one tooth.
Yep. Yes. BJ Fogg talks about that in his book, Tiny Habits. And
And
it's so true.
she's like, she goes, we all got 30 something teeth in our mouth. And she said, if I told you to floss every single day, somehow flossing 30 teeth would seem like the biggest chore on the planet. But if I told you every single day, pick a tooth to floss, it would seem like you're like, yeah, it's one tooth, right? And so then you have the camp would be like, oh, that's too easy, right? And then you'd have the camp would be like, is this really gonna work? And then next thing you know, 30 days later, you're like, I've literally flossed more than I've ever flossed in my life. But two, I've stuck with it. And
Yes.
the key with the habit is what's something you can stick with?
Yeah. Yeah. Your baseline. So, like, okay, let's say that walking is something you want to do every day, like the example I gave before, and you come down with the flu. Are you going to be able to go walk a mile with the flu? Probably not. Can you put your shoes on? Yes. And the reason why something so basic as putting your shoes on or flossing one tooth matters is that you continue to wire in the action. You're
Yeah.
doing a very tiny version of it, but you keep that neural wiring, which is what's super important. And then when you start out, like the flossing the one tooth thing or putting on your shoes, are you just putting on your shoes? Or are you just putting on one or just flossing one tooth? No, you're probably going to do more than that,
Right.
but you make it okay if you don't. And again, that goes back to feeling good. And then you're more likely to stick with it.
And this is what I think what you just said is the big takeaway. Make it okay. Right. Because
Yep.
in our mind, if I don't floss all 32 teeth or I don't walk the mile, you make put meaning into that. The invisible judges out there are going to judge that you didn't do all 32 of your teeth, or you only got to a half mile. And, maybe it's like that's all you could do that day. And the judges are like, that didn't count.
I know who, like, yeah, why do we get so self-critical about things like this? I mean, objectively, it would be better to floss one tooth than no teeth. It's also like, and I'm guilty of this too. Oh, I don't have time to do my full workout, so I'm not going to bother going to the gym. It would be better to go and work out 10 minutes than not at all. Or if I really don't have time, why don't I just do a workout at home for 30 minutes or whatever time I'm saving with the drive? But
Yeah.
it's again, it goes back to the all or nothing thing that we've got to let go of.
Yeah. When I first started to let go of my all or nothing thing, at the time, I would work out literally in my pajamas. I would just like, go downstairs and have a cup of coffee, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go upstairs and get dressed. And then, of course, an hour would go by and the coffee is now gone and cold, and I still didn't work out. And I was like, you know what? Don't go upstairs. Just work out in your pajamas. And it just got me in the habit of just like being okay with, I'm in my pajamas, being okay with it's going to be 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and not having to feel like there has to be this whole like orchestrated movement around said habit.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be such a production.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing too is like how much things compound. So like
Yes.
you improve 0.5% every single day. Well, that compounds. At the end of the year, you're 6 times better than you are today. 0.5%, that's like you wouldn't even notice that. You wouldn't even be able to self-sabotage yourself because it would be so insignificant. But
Yeah.
again, we think, oh, I have to improve 6x today, or why bother?
Yeah. Well, and it's like I love social media. At the same time, I sometimes want to strangle it, because on social media I see that, Sharon, she lost 30 pounds in 30 days. I see that Sharon, made $30 million in 30 days. And I see all these things that I'm like, well, I only made $1 today. Or, I haven't lost any weight in the last 30 days. And so we start to play this comparison game of I am behind.
Mhm. Yep.
And as you mentioned, here's where, you would be like, all right, Sharon, that's great, fabulous. But what habits did you do?
And did you do something so extreme that you're going to completely fall off the wagon and not be able to keep this going?
Yeah. Because if I think about any of it, it's like, did I have to, going back to our original conversation, did I have to hustle so hard that by the time I finished said 30 days, 60 days, whatever the time frame it is, am I willing to keep that up, or am I just like passed out on the floor because I'm exhausted?
100%. Here's the other thing too, why I feel like quote unquote, overnight success or like really fast results are not in your best interest.
Yeah.
Your identity has got to
Whoa.
level up with the result or you won't be able to hold it. Have you heard the analogy of the identity as a thermostat before?
Yes.
Man, it's so true. So true. Like if your identity is at like a, let's just say in a given area of your life, because I feel like every area has got its own thermostat setting.
Yes.
Let's say for wealth, it's set at 72 degrees and you come into 100 degrees of money. How does the thermostat work? If it's
Oh,
100
I'm gonna
degrees
burn that
outside,
shit down.
yeah, it's going to go on overdrive. It's going to bring the temp back down because you're not at 100 degree identity
Yep.
yet. So that's what I like about the really incremental change. It gives your identity and your sense of self a chance to catch up so that you can actually maintain the progress. Because otherwise, it's like when people meet like someone who would have been perfect for them and they like throw the relationship away or friend zone them. It's like, That's because you still had too low self of worth or self worth to hang on to that partner, right?
Right.
So like we've all done this in some way,
Oh
but
God,
yeah,
yeah.
your identity's got to adjust or it ain't going to be a fun ride.
Or you are so, stuck in your identity that you're like the rigidity of your identity wouldn't allow you to expand, to
Yeah.
accept whatever the new information coming in is.
So true. I know. I think people get really attached to like
Mm,
emotions, to states of being, even if the emotions aren't pleasant. Like you can get so addicted to the feeling of being miserable that you will want to stay miserable because you're hooked on that chemical like a
yeah,
drug. Like that's real talk.
right.
Like, how do you shift out of that?
Because it's like a lot of my ladies are extreme dieters, they because they would get the accolades like, Alicia, look at you, girl. And what are you doing? And you're like, nothing. You're right. And it just, you're like, you're doing all the things, but you're like, you don't want to like open your crazy to the world of like, I'm only eating Tic Tacs and Diet Coke, and I'm on the Stairmaster 5 hours a day, and all the things.
Yeah.
But it's like if you're getting accolades for something, you don't want to give it up, even if
Yes.
it's killing you.
Yeah. But eventually you're going to have to
Oh,
because
eventually.
that debt has to get paid at some
Yes.
point. So you can
Yeah.
kick the can down the road for a while, but at some point it catches up and then you backslide and you have to start again. And hopefully you
Yeah.
do it sustainably the next time.
Um, I remember that this was like an old boss was completely like unrelated to fitness. And he said, he's like, how you get to your goal is how you keep your goal.
Mm.
And at the time that was during my like, like hustle was like across my shirt. And he just kind of, sometimes he would just look at me and just be like, you're here when I get here, you're, float, turning the lights out when we leave, at some point, like this isn't a sustainable way to live.
Yeah.
But of course, if you aren't ready to hear that, you're just like, shut up. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. Yeah. It can fall on deaf ears. But also, I do want to say, I acknowledge there are different seasons of life. Like, since the
Yes.
book came out, I'm now in a season of getting to rest and relax and enjoy things a little bit more. When I was writing the book and getting it out, I was up at 5 a.m. every day writing, and it was a lot of hours spent. So there are going to be seasons where you are working more, but if you think that that level of hustle and hard work is a permanent thing, you're going to burn out. And we can't afford for you to burn out. We need your message, we need your gifts, right? So you got to
Right.
protect it, not even just for your own good, but for the good of all, I believe.
Yeah. And so, you talked about like, what was it about the habits that kind of got you like through kind of like leaving Google, starting your business? Like, what was it that you're kind of like, what, there's something here. Like this is like a thing.
Well, gosh. Okay. So I leave Google and I do all the same crap I did in corporate as an entrepreneur,
Mm.
such as like, oh, okay, like I've kind of taken it easy. Let me do a calling blitz and like blow up my quota. So, like, what that would look like in entrepreneurship might be like, oh, I've kind of taken it easy. Like, let me go psycho and like build out, 3 offers in a week and try to launch them all at the same time, stuff like that. Put all my eggs in one basket, so to speak. And the thing about being your own boss, you don't have like a corporate logo to hide behind, right? Like it's it's all you. And so the the more that you grow personally, the more your impact and your income grows. So if you're doing things that are going to limit you and keep you capped and burn you out, that ain't going to work too well. So I was on this boom and bust cycle for a little while. And after the first company that I launched, I shouldn't say it failed to launch. It just wasn't really what I was hoping for. I'm like, I don't know if this is the thing I want to be doing forever. And then oh yeah, that's a whole other story that we could tell another day. I was
Mhm.
a 7-figure online wine business owner, shut that down, and now I don't drink. Definitely another story for another day. but it was just a lot of pivoting. So finally, I'm like, okay, I can't do this like boom and bust anymore, this up down roller coaster. How can I be more even keeled and for the good of all, for my health, my mental health, for the sake of my marriage, for setting a good example for my daughter? And the thing that you like follow the breadcrumbs that the universe drops you, and it
Yeah.
was habits, habits, habits. Like Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. That was a book I read during this time frame that kind of got me going on it. Then I read Atomic Habits, and a lot of that really resonated with me. And I just kept implementing things I was learning, and I'm like, oh wow, this really does make a difference, and it wasn't painful. And
Right.
then I just love to go down a rabbit hole and like learn a lot about something that I'm interested in. And so I became a full student of habits, and now here we are.
Yeah. No, I think that, I'm hoping that more people as they listen to this, there's some nugget that you dropped along the way that maybe habits have been something that's been percolating for you. Like you said, like just kept popping up, just kept popping up. And so maybe this is the podcast, maybe your book is the book that will finally get people to say, huh, maybe I should sit down and figure this stuff out.
Yeah, and you can make it fun too. I think what kept me away from habits, and I don't really like the word discipline, I prefer dedication or devotion personally.
Yeah.
But I think what kept me away from the practice for so long is that I thought it was just going to be super rigid and make
Mm,
me really boring and like have no life. And in fact, it does the opposite. But
yes.
here's the thing I'll caution listeners with. If you're only doing it like in a strategic, tactical way, it's probably not going to last. I'm blending like the spiritual and like meaningful components of habits with the tactics, the
Yes.
science to back it up. Because if you don't really know why you're doing it and what the bigger picture is, it's going to be a lot harder to stick with on the days that are not easy. And those days will come.
Right there. That right there. Why? Like I always, people will come to you and they're like, "Oh, well, I want this business or I want to lose weight." And you ask the simple question, "Why?" And many people pause. They're like, if they don't have an answer, and the people who do have the answer to be like, "I want to play with my kids." Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
want to leave a legacy for my kids. Or, my VA, she's like, I'm doing this because I want to send my kids to private school. Like, so it's like that in the back of your mind is like, I want to lose the weight because I want to play with my grandkids. I want to play with my kids. And that's like even more motivating than, that for you personally, that's motivating. For anyone else, it could be like, I want to put on my favorite pair of jeans. Great, awesome, rock on with your bad self.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, can you peel back the layers of that why onion?
Yeah.
For me, it's usually like 7 whys. So, like,
Yeah.
I want to play with my grandkids. Okay, well, why does that matter to me? Oh, because I didn't know my paternal grandparents, and that makes me really sad. Well, why does that matter? Like, just keeping going,
Yeah.
like, until you get to the root of it. And it should, it's very cliche, but like the why that makes you cry, right?
Yeah.
That's the one that's really going to get you up and out of bed and moving on the days that you'd rather not.
And that's exactly what most people are like, well, why does that matter? And I go, let me just tell you, I live in New England and in February it's cold, it's dark, and the last thing I want to do is drag my ass out of bed. But when I'm laying in bed, my why is what's like, so Kim, if you really want to go on the vacation and feel comfortable in your clothing, do you think
Yeah.
laying in bed right here is going to get you there? And
Yeah.
that is what gets my butt out of bed. Right. So it's
Yeah.
like, Tony Robbins is like, ask yourself better questions. I'm like, my why makes me ask myself better questions so that when I
Mhm.
am in that, like, my fuck it spiral, I can ask myself a question to help me get out of that spiral.
Yes. I love pairing identity with it too. Like, okay, I take people through a guided visualization, and you can even go download that on my website too, where you really get to like intimately see and know who your higher self is. And I'll ask myself, like, well, what would my higher self do?
Mm,
Okay. Well, if that's going to be my guiding light, I better act in that identity in order to have what she has.
right. It's kind of like I can't remember the book, but it's always like act as if, right? So it's like
Yep.
act as if I am that person who maybe it takes me 6 months to really truly like grow into that person, but act like the person I want to be. And it's not taking these giant steps. It's like it could just be like if you want to be a marathon runner, put on the damn shoes. Like it could just be put on the damn shoes and start there. And eventually you'll grow into the marathoner. And
Yeah.
those of you who know me are probably laughing. They're like, Kim running? I know. I only run unless I'm being chased. I get that.
And
But
you
the
know,
analogy works.
on that note too, like if let's say that you're like, oh yeah, I want to run a marathon, and like you cannot bring yourself to like get the shoes or like go on the runs, like, well, do you actually want to do it? Or
Yes.
did someone make you think you should do it?
Right. And it's mostly, and you probably see this in the entrepreneurial space as well. But, most people are like, oh, Kim, I was at a party and I heard about the ABC diet. And I was like, okay. And I was like, why do you want to do it? Well, Sharon lost 300 pounds. I was like, well, was Sharon 600 pounds? Like, what
Yeah.
is it that's appealing to you other than Sharon did it? Because I'm like, you're going to start down this road and then you're going to tell me you want to have ice cream with your kids. And Sharon didn't eat ice cream for a year. Like,
Yeah.
is that going to be okay for you?
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, I love that. Doing things that are aligned to you, not things that you think you should be doing. I always say, stop shoulding on yourself.
Oh yeah. And so many, for the all or nothing people who are still listening, like that's what keeps you stuck. Cause it's like you have
Mhm.
your laundry list of shoulds, and all it takes is one trip over should number one or should number 10, and your day is just crap. Like, or the
Yep.
week, or how the next 6 months, who knows but how big the trip is, you um kind of story eyes in your mind.
Yep, and the shame spiral and yeah,
Mm,
yeah. Focus on what's truly aligned to you, then make it tiny, like the micro version of that habit, and then celebrate yourself like crazy the
yes.
moment you do it. Like the moment you do it. Rewarding yourself later with a trip to Nordstrom or a nice dinner, that is not going to trigger the reward center of your brain and wire it in. You have to celebrate as you are doing it to
Yeah.
release all those feel good chemicals.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And I really like that your book is rooted on something that all of us, if you went to college, everyone had to take some type of basic psychology class. And, Maslow was uh a part of that. And maybe you are like me, you're like, I'm never gonna use this in my life. And today you're using it in your life. So I absolutely love that there's some root here that it's like things we already know. How do we apply to the things that like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that from college or high school. And now it's like being applied and it's simple,
Yeah.
right? It's like, what are your needs? Like, and it's personalized because the more you personalize it, the more I'm able to hook in and like
Yeah.
and really take ownership. Because if you told me like, ah, Kim, you got to focus on sleep, and I'm like, yeah, I sleep really good. Like, I don't really give a shit about sleep. Like, I'm not going to get so tied into it. But for you, you're like, I know that I need to sleep because heck, you got a little kid. They got a lot of energy.
And mine's pretty chill, but I've always needed a lot of sleep. It's just my husband even got warned about that by my dad when he asked for my hand in marriage. My dad was like, "Make sure she gets enough sleep or she's a real bitch." And he's right. He's not wrong. It was good advice. So like know your weaknesses and make sure that you solidify them wherever possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's so funny. For me, it's food. It's like make sure she eats, or like you want no piece of that when she's hungry.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hangry. I've been known to say and do things that I'm not proud of when I'm hangry. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Focus on the basics. The rest tends to take care of itself. But the basics are boring. So you got to fall in
Yes.
love with the boring and just put them on autopilot until I- here's the thing too. When you do that, then there's no decision fatigue and it just gets
Yes.
easier. Like your brain wants to save energy. So wire in the basics so that you don't even have to think about them. And then you get to use your brain on way more exciting and fulfilling things.
It's funny, like whenever I'm starting to kind of get into that kind of like the basics of boring. And yes, I fall into that category, the basics of boring sometimes. And I think about Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs wore the same five like things every day for I don't even know how long he started it. But it was like, because he's like, I don't want to think about my clothes.
Yeah, Zuckerberg too with the gray t-shirt. I think now
Right.
he's branched into white here and there, but
Right.
like Yeah.
But he's like, maybe wait when he's like on a certain background. But it's like, I'm like, when that first concept came up, I was like, I don't really understand that. Like, because I like clothing, but I'm like, if that doesn't really mean anything to you, take the decisions out. He's like, I have 5 things I wear, and it's like it's mix and match depending on how I feel that day. And
Yeah.
so that's the same thing with the habit, right? It's just like, nail in the. I always start with like 1 to 3, right? Because it's like 1 to 3 things, and just get good at that.
Yep.
And then we can layer and layer and layer and layer.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't try to do too much too soon. And
Yeah.
if you can, narrow in on one thing that will affect more positively downstream.
Mm,
So let's just say it's like moving your body first thing in the morning. Well, if you do that, you're probably going to drink more water. You're
right.
probably going to be more mindful about what you're eating because you moved your body and you want to nourish it. And maybe you're also, considering the aesthetics. Like it has all, and you're probably going to sleep better too. You're probably going to have a higher sex drive. Like it's going to have all these downstream
Yeah.
benefits. So, what is one thing that you could focus on that will have a multiplier effect so that you also don't have to work so hard?
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. But yeah, Matchmaker, she's dropped some serious nuggets here for you. And everything here, not rocket science, right? There wasn't like, okay, step 1, go out and get this, and step 2, go out and get that. And, in probably 3 weeks, you'd have all the pieces together. Like you can literally sit down right now today and say to yourself, what do I need? Like, what do I know? Like she knows if she doesn't sleep well. I know if I don't eat, I'm like, we're crazy. Like, what's your one thing that if you don't do it, you're crazy? And ask your friends, ask your family, they'll tell you.
Oh, yeah. If you're not sure,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
phone
we
a
all
friend.
know, we all know, maybe some of us aren't, doesn't have that like a self-awareness just yet. But in her book, she breaks this out really simply for you. So it's not one of these like heady books that you have to go and like Google definitions. So, if you want simple, because like my favorite book is James Clear because it's simple. This is gonna be my second favorite book because it's simple. I
Mm.
don't want to have to think too much. I want little quick hits that make me feel like I can do this. And this book does that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and if any of you listening are interested in getting it, Higher Self Habits, it is on Amazon. You can visit my website, alessiacitro.com/book, and it is there. And then I also have a free gift for listeners too. alessiacitro.com/gift. I've got a capability guide. So I told you earlier, capability is the thing that will
Yes.
make habits stick. So I break it all down, so you can grab that, and then I also have the guided visualization there so you can meet your higher self, which is like sometimes when people do that, they cry. It's like a very emotional, like enlightening exercise because you get to see who you were actually created to be, and then you get to go do all the things to become them. It's pretty cool.
Perfect. I love both of that. Like the capacity, the capability. Like I think so many people sleep on that it's just I should versus it sounds great, but are you ready? Are you there just yet? Or do I have to grow into that piece?
Yeah, and how can you make it easier? Because you probably have
Yes.
friction in there that doesn't need to be there. Remove the
Right.
friction, babes.
And
You don't need
sometimes the
it.
friction is as big as the state of New York. So, we need to make it a little less friction. Um, and so where can people find you on the socials?
I am most active on Instagram, so I'll just say that one. I'm on LinkedIn too, but I struggle a little bit over there. So find me on the gram. We'll be friends. It's Alessia Citro, ALESSIACITRO, 2 underscores, because believe it or not, I guess there are other Alessia Citros. And
Wow.
if you're on LinkedIn, find me over there too, and we'll be friends. Maybe I'll be more active if you come find me.
And I ask every single person. Oh, by the way, all of these will be linked in the show notes, including be able to get your capabilities guide, and all of that will be linked in the show notes, just in case you are on the go. And I ask everyone, what is one thing that makes you feel magical?
The answer to this is kind of surprising to me. It's different than it would have been even like a couple years ago, but it's being outside in nature,
Mm,
like bare feet in the grass, on a hike, sunshine on my face. Like that is magic. Makes you present, makes you feel so good,
mm.
tunes you back into your true nature.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love this question because, I've asked it over 200 times and I don't think I have had a repeat.
Oh, that's cool.
I've never had a repeat, and every single one, it just I never know what you're gonna say. I have no idea. And it's always when you say it, I'm like, God, that's a good one.
Well, especially because like you remember in Titanic how Jack is like, oh, like I figured you were more of like an indoor girl. Like I definitely like look more like an indoor girl, but man, being being outside though, truly magical.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for being outside, and I didn't like it's, I live in Boston, so like you don't really realize how much you like being outside until you're trapped inside like 4 months
Yeah.
on end.
I lived in Chicago for a while, so I
You
fully
know
get
that,
that.
the feeling. Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Got to make hay while the sun is shining, as my grandpa used to say.
Yes, I am making hay right now. Everyone was like, goodbye, summer. I'm like, oh, you shut that down. Like, it's like, I'm gonna hold on with both hands until like finally I'm forced to put a coat on.
Yeah. Yeah. Unsubscribe from summer being over. Nope.
Yes, I am fully unsubscribing and I'm blocking you and I'm calling you spam. All right, magic makers, thank you so much for listening in. God, I mean, I've taken notes. You guys know I've taken like multiple notes on what she has said today. And please, please, please buy the book. You'll absolutely find at least one nugget, if not 10 nuggets for this. Thank you, Alessia, so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.